Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And just 2 weeks after Wargaming released the first Czechoslovakian heavy tank in the game, the Skoda T45, at a whopping, I think, 12 or 10,000 bond price. Yeah, they've gone and done the dirty, and they're sending something that's actually interesting in the Czechoslovakian heavy line to the super test. This is the Skoda T56, and it kind of looks as if it's going to be a heavy borask. If that hasn't piqued your interest, I really don't know what will. In today's video, I'm going to go through all of the statistics that we have of the Skoda T56, compare it to a couple of vehicles, and just give you my initial opinions about this tank and also what it might suggest for the Czechoslovakian heavies. So right off the bat, the Skoda T56 kind of looks as if it's a chunky version of maybe a Polish medium tank, like the CS52 Lis, or alternatively, maybe an influence of some of the top-tier Polish heavy tanks as well, like the 60 TP. This is unfortunately the only image that we have so far of the vehicle, and this looks like it could be space protection over the front of the turret. It does look like it's going to have a cupola though. Ooh, it's going to be a bit of a weak point. And this upper hull, it looks fairly well angled, and the lower plate as well, so if the armor is thick, that should work out well. The tank to me looks as if it's fairly low profile, although it's really hard to try and gauge just how chunky these vehicles are. It looks very wide, you know, a lot like those Soviet double-barreled tanks that went into the game. But with the Object 7032 being wide, doesn't really seem to be an issue as long as you do have that low profile to be able to hide your weaker points. And for all of you out there who are crew training at the moment in the Tier 7 Skoda T45 that you spent your hard bonds on, you're going to need a commander, a loader, a gunner, and a driver in this vehicle. Very standard setup, and its ammunition loadout will be armor-piercing, high-explosive anti-tank, and high-explosive rounds. Alright, so in true QuickyBaby fashion, I had to go and take these statistics and put them out onto an Excel document, and then see how the Skoda T56 is going to compare against something classic heavy, like the Defender and the Basonte. Now, why am I comparing this to the Defender and the Basonte? Well, when I said that this thing is like a heavy borask, yeah, I wasn't joking. This thing, if it goes into the game as it is, and let me remind you, this is a super test, everything is subject to change. Wargaming might improve the statistics, they might make the statistics worse, so I can only go at face value about what they have provided us. Well, I can tell you that if it does stay as it is, then it will have the highest caliber gun and the highest alpha damage of any Tier 8 heavy tank. That's right, this thing has a 130mm caliber gun. In fact, I just need to triple check. Is this a Tier 8? Yes, it is a Tier 8. Okay, that's usually the kind of gun caliber you would have on a Tier 9 or a Tier 10. That is very meaty indeed, and that's going to allow you to overmatch all 40mm plates, just like you can, for example, on a Defender. And overmatching 40mm plates is tremendously advantageous. For example, is there a T100LT? You hit it in the side. It could bounce with a gun caliber that's 119 and lower, but to have that big meaty gun means that it's going to overmatch. Also, roof decks, a lot of opportunities here, especially on the lower caliber tanks. If you do learn some of the plates on the common vehicles, you're going to be able to have some funky opportunities, a lot like you can in your Soviet heavies. A lot of people always wonder, why do Soviet heavy shells always go in? Well, it's because that gun caliber at a relatively low tier of Tier 8 or even lower, when you have it on something like the IS, will just be overmatching all of those 40mm plates. And the Skoda T56 is going to be doing that as well. And with a larger caliber gun, usually the alpha damage is going to increase. And this is no exception. Wargaming seem to be just putting it up a little bit. 460. Is that what the power creep is in 2021? Oh, look, I digress. That might be a little bit cheeky. But 460 alpha damage. I don't think there's another tank in the game that deals that much. So the Skoda T56 is going to be the first, if things stay as they are. That will give it the highest alpha damage of any Tier 8 heavy. Actually, no. What am I talking about? There is the VK, what is it? The 7501K, the Tier 8 premium. The side-scraping behemoth that also has, 490 alpha damage. So I stand corrected. But one thing that tank doesn't have, is an autoloader. This thing has a 2-round autoloader, like the Borask, which will allow it to deliver 2 of those shells within succession of each other. So that is 920 alpha damage within 4 seconds of the first shot. Now look, that's not quite as good as maybe delivering the 720 that the Borask does in 2 seconds, and trust me, everyone knows just the difference between 2 seconds and 4 seconds with regards to using an autoloader is significant. But still, that 4-second window will quite likely allow you to be able to deliver 2 shots against that heavy, like a surprise attack on a heavy from the side or behind, and then pull back around the corner and then try and reload for the subsequent 25 seconds that it takes this vehicle to reload those 2 rounds. So all in all, I think this could be an absolute devastating vehicle. Being able to come around the corner against maybe 2 tanks that have 350 hit points and being able to deliver them into each of them, finishing them off within 4 seconds. Or alternatively, think about the tier 6 medium tanks that have about 800 hit points in the game. Yeah. Now you're getting to the stage where you are going to 2-shot them cleanly, rather in something like a Borask or maybe in the Basonte, where you're going to have to fire 3 shells into them. So just to compare this directly to the Italian auto-reloading heavy tank, and while the Skoda T56 isn't going to have all of the advantages with an auto-reloader, it's still going to be comparable. I think that's the closest autoloader to what this thing is going to be able to achieve. So the Basonte has 360 alpha damage and a 3-second intraclip reload. So it's going to take 6 seconds to be able to deliver 1080 damage. Now, 6 seconds to deliver 1080 damage is not nearly as good, in my opinion, as delivering 920 within 4. And more importantly, remember, after you've delivered those rounds in the Basonte, then you have the world's worst reload of 17 seconds to reload the 3rd shell, then 15 seconds to reload the 2nd shell, and 12 seconds to reload the final shell. I'm glad my fingers just worked that way, otherwise I would have been inadvertently flipping off my entire YouTube audience. I digress. Okay, stay on focus. All right. The Basonte's DPM will be tragic after it's unloaded. However, the Skoda T56 is very simple. As it stands, 25 seconds to be able to get both of those rounds back in. The Basonte is going to take a crazy amount of time to be able to reload after it's unloaded. You've got 17 plus 15, we've got 32, and then the cherry on top, the 12 at the end, the faster loading shell, giving you 44 seconds to be able to reload an entire magazine that if you unload it again is going to deal 1080, whereas that Skoda T56 reloaded 920 alpha damage within 25 seconds of the final shell. This actually gives the Skoda T56 one of the highest damage per minute of any Tier 8 heavy tank, 1903, and considering it has an autoloader, Wargaming, I'm very concerned about the power of this thing as it stands. If it goes into the game like this thing is going to be an absolute behemoth. But of course, we've got to look at all of the other statistics as well. So before we move on to the gun handling, I should mention the vehicle's penetration. Yeah, Wargaming seem to be balancing this tank by giving it 208 millimeters of armor-piercing penetration. That's really bad for a 2021 heavy tank, right? Most heavy tanks these days, at least in my opinion, unless you're something funky like the Basonte, are kind of packing at least 220, if not 230 to be preferable. However, this always annoys me when Wargaming do this. They give it terrible penetration on its standard rounds of 208, but they give it awesome gold penetration of 290. What's up with that? Why do they want to make it so easy for this vehicle to penetrate with gold, but struggle so much with the standard rounds? It's poor balancing, in my opinion, when there's such a large disparity, nearly 50%, or I guess fairer, 40% between the standard rounds and the gold rounds on this tank. And so this vehicle's looking like it could just be an absolute pay-to-win monstrosity with that damage per minute as well. Okay, so now let's move on to the gun handling of the Skoda T56. So 0.4 accuracy. Not bad for such a large caliber gun. Better than the Defender, better than the Basonte. Aim time of 2.9 seconds. Again, not bad for such a large caliber gun. It's definitely not fantastic, but it's better than the Defender. And considering it has higher alpha and it has an autoloader, that's not bad news, but it is slightly worse than the Basonte. Things that we don't know, however, will be the dispersion values of this tank. You know, the dispersion when moving, the dispersion when turning the turret. If Wargaming make these statistics horrific, then it might balance out fairly okay gun handling for such a large caliber. If they don't, well then that's going to be an absolute monster. And we all know just how important dispersion values are for autoloaders, because you want to really pull in that bloom. And that's why quite often you'll use vertical stabilizers and a rotation device on autoloaders to be able to combat that wild dispersion on the tank. Now let's move on to the gun depression. 8 degrees? That's awesome. For such a high caliber gun, and also considering just how the armor layout on this vehicle looks, where you really want to be trying to angle that upper plate, and you want to be hopefully trying to hide that cupola using the space protection on the front of the vehicle, I'm thinking that could be absolutely monstrous on this tank. But of course, Wargaming have done stranger things. Maybe they'll make like a weak point on the turret, or kind of make this gun mantlet weak. I don't know why, but maybe some tanks they do. Or maybe this weak point on top of the vehicle is going to be really prominent even when it's using its 8 degrees of gun depression. This thing is kind of looking a lot to me like a 60 TP at tier 8 with an autoloader with these kind of statistics. I'm looking, and of course I'd be liking, because I'm going to get one of these things, but I'm not going to be liking if I'm going to be on the enemy team for this kind of a vehicle. All right, elevation 15, no one really cares about that, and the turret traverse is 26, the same as the Basante. All right, so now let's move on to the mobility. The engine power is 650, fairly comparable. The weight is almost identical to the Basante. Does anyone get the feeling that they kind of took the Basante as the base and then kind of just wanted to make it like a Borask? It's a Boronte or something like that. The power to weight on this vehicle is 13.5, pretty similar to the Defender. It's limited to 35 forwards though. This might be one of the balancing features of this tank. I feel like that's just a little too slow in 2021 to be considered crazy OP, right? The Basante, for example, that 50 km/h top speed limit, I love it. I'll use it to race down a slope to get into a prominent position to, win that ridge line and then hopefully take it to my opponents. That 35 limit is definitely going to make the Skoda T56 truly feel like a super heavy rather than some kind of an opportunistic hull down tank. And yeah, when you're side scraping on a corner with that 130mm caliber gun, I think it might be better to just have a single shot gun for that kind of scenario. Whereas a vehicle like the Borask is an opportunist. It will use its mobility to be able to get into position, to be able to deliver that double shot. Maybe the Skoda T56, due to its lack of mobility, is not going to be able to use its 2-round autoloader in the same way that the Borask or something like the EBR-75 can. The reverse speed on the vehicle is nice though, 15, and the hull traverse 26 is fairly average. Alright, so now we're on to the armor of the vehicle. 100mm of armor at the front. Ooh, that's not very good, is it? 70 at the side, 70 at the rear. Not great at all. Way worse than the Basante, and I would never consider the Basante has good armor protection. And remember, the Basante has heat protection in the form of a spaced armor over the hull, and I can't really see that on this tank. So you're really going to have to probably try and angle. I tried to turn the vehicle sideways there. Oh my god, thank goodness it's Friday. But I guess if you're using your gun depression, maybe the armor can still work out very well. The turret, on the other hand, seems to be a saving grace of the vehicle, at least frontally. 220 on the front of the turret, 95 on the side, and 70 at the rear looks phenomenal. And I'm just looking at this thinking this has to be space protection. Is that 220 effective millimeters of armor? Well, no, it's actually saying that it's raw armor here. If that's space protection in addition to that 220, that could be absolutely tremendous as to what this vehicle is capable of frontally. And let's be honest, that's where you want to have your armor focused. At the front of the tank, point your gun towards your opponents and grind them down. Not going to make it so good at being that classic super heavy kind of role where it's trying to avoid taking damage from all sides. But then again, maybe that's what the spaced armor over the side of the turret is like. A lot like what they had on the Basante, but that doesn't work against all rounds, right? Hit points wise, fairly standard, 1,500. And one thing that I like about this vehicle is 370 meters view range. Look, that's not great. Some vehicles are packing 390 or 400 at tier 8 heavy, but it's not blind like the Defender. So that means that if you have a really good crew, you're still going to have okay view range on this tank. However, do you want to take coated optics on it? It all depends on how Wargaming deal with the dispersion values on this tank. Because if they give it absolutely horrific dispersion values and you want to improve those using vertical stabilizers or a rotation device on the tank to allow it to have its autoloader vibe and status of delivering those rounds quickly, then you're probably going to have to make the sacrifice with regards to the equipment slot. And I don't know about you, but seeing how this vehicle is going to be so slow at 35, I'd probably even want to get a I'd probably even want to possibly get a turbo on this tank, although I think that's probably getting cliche from me now recently. I guess if you don't mind getting there a little bit slower and then you just want to be strong once you've got there, then a setup like vertical stabilizers with possibly a rotation device and vents might be good on this tank. All in all, the Skoda T56 is looking like the tank that I would have wanted to spend 10,000 bonds on, but I think that Wargaming are probably planning to have this in some kind of mission marathon later on in the year when they plan to release the Czechoslovakian heavy tanks. And if they don't want to release it in a mission marathon, maybe they'll just sell it for cold, hard cash inside the premium store. All in all, this vehicle, I don't think it looks just outrageously overpowered. I don't really like this. I really don't like this. This 208 and 290 disparity between the rounds means that it doesn't look like it's going to be fantastic for a free-to-play player. But for those pay-to-win players who are just loading gold at every opportunity in this vehicle, even against the equal and lower-tier tanks, this thing's going to be an absolute pain. The kind of things that you can do with 290 millimeters of penetration against hull armor are going to be pretty wild. And taking 460 alpha damage and then taking another 460 alpha damage 4 seconds later, looks like this thing's going to be pretty wild. Combine that with 8 degrees of gun depression, fairly okay statistics with regards to its gun handling. It looks like it's going to have all of its armor front loaded, which is probably where you're going to be fighting this tank unless you manage to flank it. And if it's getting onto a town map or it's just managing to control the engagement, it could be quite hard to flank this thing in the hands of a capable player. I just feel like it's going to be tricky to engage. It's going to be that kind of tank that you hopefully want to bounce once, or just take one and then bounce one, and then you only really have 25 seconds to go at them. Let's imagine that you're in a vehicle that has a 4 round a minute rate of fire. You know, your reload is 15 seconds. Okay, you're going to come around the corner, get one shot in, reload, possibly get another one, and then it's like, oh god, oh god, oh god, it's ready to deliver another 2 rounds of 460 alpha damage to me. This thing looks monstrous. So what does it suggest to me for the Czechoslovakian heavy tanks? Are Wargaming going to just make them a bit like the Italian auto-reloading heavies? It seems a bit weird to me. Do we really need every vehicle that goes into the game to have an auto-loader? Why? I don't really see too many of the Italian auto-reloading heavies in the game. They don't seem to be too popular considering that they were only just released. Surely Wargaming should probably make some changes to those vehicles if they feel that they're not doing too well, rather than just releasing more auto-reloading heavies into the, well, not auto-reloading, but auto-loading heavies into the game. This definitely isn't an auto-reloader, at least with the statistics that we have now, and I don't think that's going to change. All in all, Skoda T56 looks awesome. And I'd also like to kind of call out Wargaming a little bit for releasing just such a mundane, boring tank in the form of the Skoda T45 and then putting the pressure on us to spend bonds on a tank like this that we probably won't ever really care about unless we're being tank collectors. And then a couple of weeks later, thankfully just before the end of ranks, before everybody has had to commit to purchasing one, then they show us this. I would be rather unhappy if I had bought the Skoda T45 and then I see that this thing is going to be coming out not in the foreseeable future. Possibly it's going to be maybe a few months from now. And it might be in a completely different position, considering just how good the statistics look on this tank. But all in all, I know that I will never play the Tier 7 heavy tank. This will be my crew trainer. This will be the more fun vehicle to play. And as a higher tier premium, this will be the one that makes me those sweet credits. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was it for today. That was my first look at the Skoda T56. Let me know what you think about this tank in the comments down below. Do you think it looks like a heavy Borask? What do you think we have in store for us with the Czechoslovakian heavies in the future, considering that this looks like this is going to be the Tier 8 Premium? Are you breathing a sigh of relief that we've actually got something interesting to look forward to after the absolute joke that was the Skoda T45 for bonds? Oh well. And let me know in the comments down below if you're furious that you feel like you've wasted all of your hard-earned bonds on a tank with some kind of peer pressure of it maybe being a rarity, and now you're seeing this. Do you have buyer's remorse? I hope you don't have. Sorry if I'm instilling it in you. It's how I would feel personally. And if you've enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. I just punched my light. which I don't have on because thankfully, oh my god, it's spring and it's starting to get really nice outside. Lighting's better in this room when it's not me in my dark, dingy dungeon. Okay, anyway, whatever. Yeah. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you hate it, give it a thumbs down. Have a lovely weekend, whatever you all choose to get up to. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon.